Topic 5.3 is about soil degradation and conservation. Now that we've described what soil is made of, what the purposes, functions of soil are, and we've talked about how a country would adapt its food production system based on the type of soil it had and its goals, how do we go ahead and make it sustainable? How do we conserve what we've got? Let's take a look. So what are the changes that soil has to deal with? Well, one of them is water transfers. So we talked about how the properties of soil make it easy to transfer and to store water. Infiltration simply means water going into the soil, rain, evaporation, leaving it, precipitation, turning into ice, snow, and so forth. There's organic changes as more and more litter comes in and gets decomposed. This can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on what the litter is made of. Animals decompose, obviously. Feces, not a good thing for soil from a lot of animals. Bacteria fixation, very good. This is the ability to take nitrogen from the atmosphere, bring it into the soil. And a soil which doesn't have a good composition of bacteria is going to be a very weak soil. And then there's the human impact. We can try and salvage soil by adding fertilizers. Sometimes that's good. Sometimes overuse of fertilizers causes eutrophication. Mulching. Typically, farmers will let fields go fallow, or they'll add on nutrients and then plow it back in, mulch it, try and revive the soil. There are many factors which can cause the reduced fertility of soil, the ability of soil to grow crops, wind, water, erosion, salinity. Deforestation doesn't help at all. This decreases the anchorage of soil, which decreases its ability to infiltrate water, mudslides, nutrients move, erosion. Intensive grazing, not a good idea. Typically in the United States, there were historical battles between ranchers of cattle and ranchers of sheep. Sheep would come in and totally graze and remove all the organic matter from a field. And then when the ranchers came in with their cattle, there was nothing for the cattle to graze on. Big problem, overusing it. We talked about this in unit number 1, Tragedy of the Commons. What happens when there's a common area and people use it unequally. Urbanization, not a good thing. Reducing the amount of arable land. Also causes compaction of soil. We've seen this in buildings and too many houses. And it removes the topsoil. And we found out that it takes a long time to replenish, to remake the soil. Monoculture, we talked about this as a farming strategy in the United States. Not a particularly sustainable one because it causes soil exhaustion. You remove all the nutrients that one crop would need, and other crops, which have different cycles, are not replenishing those. And commercialization, you are removing the buffer areas where things can replenish by having larger and larger fields. So lots of stuff going on for soil infertility. What can we do about this? How can we compensate? Well, we talked about mulching. Farmers go ahead and get material and mulch it back in, typically a fallow field. So I once saw a farmer who let just dandelions and weeds pretty much grow in the area, clover. Not because he wanted to harvest those, but what he was planning to do was just to mulch them, take his plow and just grind them back in to get nutrients back into the soil. You typically see when you're driving out in the country, suddenly you'll see big breaks of trees almost lined up like a fence. And that's what exactly it is. It's a windbreak trying to reduce erosion caused by wind, weather conditions. You can go ahead and modify the soil and try and get it back to loam. So we talked about loam being 40-40-20 mix of sand, silt, and clay. If it's lacking in clay, you could add some clay and so forth, like that. You could terrace the fields, try and divide them all up there. And you could cover them. So a sort of, shall we say, weeds or clovers, you could just grow them to cover it, to protect the field so it doesn't lose all its resources. Let's take a look at some examples here. How about the food production system they have out in the Caribbean and how they decide to conserve fields? They don't have big open areas of farming down in the Caribbean, and they have very tropical conditions there. It can be mountainous in some places. The rainfall is particularly high. So this could cause excessive erosion of the soil. What do? They try and compensate the acidity by liming it. We do that in Oregon, by the way, since we have kind of acidic soil here. This helps to retain water. They often leave fields fallow. They do terracing to compensate for the steep topography. And they do crop covers like legumes. And that concludes our discussion on topic for soil conditions.